Now we're ready to start working on the dormer that goes on the front of the right house section. And I'm looking here at page 3 in our cutting guide, and we have several pieces that we need. The dormer sides are going to come out of one piece, and I'll show you how to subcut that. Then we have our front. We have a back and a support that are both the same size, and then 2 roof pieces. So let's talk about subcutting this dormer side. What we want to do here is measure in, the dormer side is 3 inches across. So half of 3 inches is 1.5. So we're going to make a line down the center at 1.5. And you can use your mat or measure with a ruler, however you want to do that, to make a line that comes down the center at 1.5 inches. And then we'll measure up from the bottom 1.5 and make a point on that line. And we'll measure down from the top 1.5 inches and make a point on that line. And then what we'll do is, from those points that we made, we'll connect a diagonal to the opposite corner. Excuse me. So from this bottom one, we'll mark a diagonal to the bottom right corner, and from the top marking, we'll mark a diagonal to the top left corner. And then we'll cut on this shape. So I'll do that, and then I'll be back. So once I have this cut, I end up with my 2 sides, and one faces this way and one faces this way. And that allows us to, this top angle is what joins to the roof of the front right section, and this bottom is what comes into our porch roof. So those are our 2 sides prepped with cutting. Now for the front, we need to cut some roof angles, and what we'll do is we'll mark a center point at the top, and this front piece is 3 3/4 inches wide, so you'll mark a point in the center of that 3 3/4 inch side at the top, and then measure up from the bottom on each side 4 3/4 inches, 4 3/4 up from the bottom side, and remove those 2 triangles. So that's the cutting for the dormer front. And then we have one other set of cuts to make on the roof pieces, and that is to measure in from the bottom left corner 3 1/8 inches, 3 1/8 inches from the left, make a diagonal from that point up to the top right corner, and remove that section. And we'll do that for both of the roofs. So that's our preliminary cutting of all the sides. Now let's turn our attention to prepping some of these pieces prior to assembly. So here we have the 2 back pieces, and you can see that I have them laid out in mirror image, which of course is important. These will hinge together to form the roof of the dormer, and I have gone ahead and prepped them with some score tape, and I'm going to use a piece of the Charmed I'm Sure paper for the roof for these, and I'm going to cut it exactly to the shape of the roofs. I'm not sure if this is really directional. I think I'll kind of treat it like it is, just so that in case once it's on there it looks directional, I won't have made a bad decision. So I'm going to cover those two roof pieces and then I'll be back. So I have my two roof pieces covered with patterned paper, and now I'm going to join them with a cardstock joining strip. Just on the back side, I'm going to butt the two longer edges together. And give that a burnish. And then I'm going to, on the inside here, add some joining strips to the angled edges. Give those a burnish. And then finally I'm going to mark on the side edges 1/4 of an inch in. This is for our overhang like we've done before. Trim this off. So that is our roof prep for the dormer. So I have here my two dormer sides that we cut before, and you can see I've got them laid out mirror image. That's important, of course. And then I'm going to cut out some pattern paper that is exactly the same size as these, but I don't want to attach it yet. So what I'll do is just use some of my temporary adhesive to join the paper to these sides, cut out the shapes, and then once I have the shape cut out, I'll back it with some score tape. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to do here. So here are my two side pattern papers cut. They've been prepped with score tape and I've inked their edges, so we'll just set these aside. So now I'm turning my attention to the front of the dormer, and we already had cut the roof angles, as you recall. They were measured up 4 3/4 inches from the side, connected to a center point up here at the top. And I haven't decided yet whether I want to trim out the front of the dormer with a little edging piece. So just in case, I'm going to draw a template of that edge, and so that I'll have it in case I want to do that. Continuing on with the front of the dormer, our next step will be to cut the window openings. And here on template page 9, T9, we have the layout of the windows drawn out. And we're going to cut this bottom window 1 3/8 up from the bottom, and then it is still 2 1/4 inches tall, and it is still 2 3/4 inches wide, so that leaves us with 1/2 inch on either side, since this whole dormer front is 3 3/4. And then up here at the top, I'm going to use my 1 1/4 inch steel rule die to cut a little window, and I measured up 1/2 inch to the bottom of the window, and then because the opening is 1 1/4 inches, I can measure over 1 1/4 inches from the left and the right to center that dormer window. So that's the cuttings for the window on the front. So now that we have our window openings cut, I'm going to head and prepping all the edges with score tape so that we can add our pattern paper. And for our pattern paper, I'm again going to use this purple paper. Now it is a little bit short because this front piece is 6¼ inches tall, but we won't worry about that. When we go to line it up here, we'll keep it even with that top peak because we're going to have a piece of trim that comes around here on the side. So I'm going to cut this piece of paper to 4 7/8 inch wide, and I'll leave it 6 inches tall, 4 7/8 inch wide, and then I'll score it on two sides in at 1/2 inch. So I'll do both of those steps and be back. So I have the front of my dormer prepped with score tape, and I've also prepped for the windows here in the back. That's what that is. And I've cut my pattern paper to 4 7/8 inch wide by 6 inches tall, and I've scored the two sides in at 1/2 inch and prepped them with some score tape. And again, when we make sure that when you go to attach this, you got the, if you're using directional paper, you have it facing the correct way. And when we go to attach this, as we've done with other pieces, we've got that 1/8 of an inch of play in there, so that we'll make sure that we center our front here between those two edges. And then I'm just going to make sure that I line it up with the top edge here gets, the top corner gets lined up, because we'll have this gap at the bottom, which will not be a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my paper, and then attach my windows, trim them out just like we've done many times before. So here's the front of our dormer all prepped and ready to go. So now we can put our dormer walls together. This is my back wall. So I'm just going to flip all of these guys over. And I'll use some of our joining strips on these sides here. And then we're going to join our back right in here, but before we do that, let's add some joining strips. We'll add them to all of these 4 top edges, and then to the angled edge right here. So let me do that and I'll be back. So to join our dormer back in on here, and I kind of tore this apart, you can see it looks a little distressed at this point, but that's okay. I realize that it needs to be inset inside of here and not just using butt joints. So what I'm going to do is put 2 joining strips on either end of the back. Give those a burnish. And then I've already added a piece of score tape on the outside of the back. You could just use 1/2 inch if that's all you have. And then when we go to put this in, I'm going to use a little wet glue just on these edges here. And then we'll center it on this part of the back, this part of the side right here, but we'll make sure it's inset so that the edge of this back piece is even with the side. It does not stick out. And I'll just get it lined up here in the same place on this side. And then reach in here and give that a burnish and a little squeeze, and we'll let that set up for a couple of minutes. And now I'm ready to add my little dormer support piece. And I know at the beginning of this section I said it was the same size as the back, but I've trimmed a 1/16 of an inch off of the side here, and I've corrected the cutting guide. So now this piece is just 1 inch and 7/16 inch wide. That's a 1/16 inch smaller, and that will allow us to fit it inside of here since we inset that back piece. And I'm just giving it a little dry fit here. Yeah, it looks like it'll be fine. So what I've done is added some joining strips to all 4 edges, and I'm going to put this inside of the back piece here. Probably hold it back about 1/8 of an inch from the top of the back piece, and that will help keep the whole assembly square. Just kind of fold these tabs in a little bit so they won't prematurely engage while you push it up inside of here. We'll try to keep it square. Could have drawn a line, I suppose, to help do that, but I think you'll be able to kind of look inside of here and see. I know it's hard to see with the black on black of this stuff. So I have it about 1/8 of an inch back from the top here. Maybe you can see that. And I'll just reach in here and burnish down all of the joining strips. So now we have our dormer starting to take shape, and we can finish adding our pattern paper here. I'm going to trim off these tabs a little bit just so they won't overhang the side edges, and go ahead and secure them in place. Give those a burnish. And then we have our 2 side pieces that we cut to fit. That should go right on these edges. There's a 1/16 of an inch that won't be covered, so make sure you align it with the back edge on each side. And so we'll see a little bit of a reveal here of that tab we just folded in. Don't worry about any little black that's showing down here. We'll cover that up after we put this on the roof. So I'm going to put these 2 sides on. Now that we have our dormer completed, we can do some dry fitting here onto the right front. And as you recall, we cut this notch 3 7/8 inch wide, and that should be the dimension of your house across here. So it should fit nicely in between that notch there. Oops. Tilt this up and you can see that. See how that's fitting there? And then this angle was cut to match the angle of the roof, and this is flat. So you should feel kind of a sweet spot where the roofs are meeting nicely and the walls are nicely attached, etc. And when we go to put this on here, the distance from these edges should be 1 inch to the wall, because again, this is 3 7/8 inches wide, and the roof is 5 7/8, which gives us an inch on either side of the dormer. So you may want to make a little tick marks or something to help you align where those roof joints are going to go. The only thing that you need to do before you put it down is remove this piece of score tape here. So obviously when you put it down, you want to know where you're going, because you won't be able to shift it around. There's some writing on the green paper. You might be able to just make a little dot or just a reference point for where it's going to go. That's what I'm going to do right there on this side. And then I'm going to make myself a couple of little tick marks where these corners of the roof are going to go. So I've made my tick marks and I'm ready to go for it. I'm going to, of course, put this down lightly to begin with, kind of looking out for those little tick marks I made. The only place it's going to stick to begin with is the place where that score tape is, because we haven't removed any tape backing anywhere else. And once I have that where it looks straight, I'm looking at my little marks here, then I can reach in from the bottom and engage that score tape. I'm still just kind of doing it lightly to begin with. And then up here on the roof, there's on the walls, we can reach in and release the tape backing from the part that's on this angle. I have a little 1-inch ruler here that I'm just going to use to help me keep that in line. So I have that side lightly tacked down, and then I'll remove the score tape backing from this other side. And again, use my little 1-inch ruler. And so I just had the score tape kind of lightly engaged at this point. Our unit should be sitting pretty level. Our building is level. This should be pretty level across here. It looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and give everything a final burnishing. Support this from the inside. You can also add one more strip that would join the, see if I can point to it with this, that would join the roof support here to the roof, just as a little added security. I've just got a couple of little scraps here, so I think I'll go ahead and put a piece in there. So I'm ready to dry fit the roof of the dormer onto the house, and I have it just kind of sitting up here. And we want to mark a point up here to test out the fit. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just taking a little ruler and I'm measuring in a 1/16 of an inch less than 3 inches, because that's our center point for this roof here. Remember, it's 5 7/8 inch wide. And here on this Post-it, I've made a little tick mark up from the bottom point that's a 1/2 inch. And so I'm going to just line that up, that 1/2 inch mark, with the top of my roof here. Let me see if I can show you that. So right here is the 1/2 inch tick mark up here. And that's where I'm trying out my roof fit. Now to try it out, I'm going to put my level up here on top of here and see if that roof is level, and that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to also look here at the front and make sure it looks centered right here on the dormer. Then I'm also going to look over here at the side and check out this line. Now, I don't have much of a gap here. If you had a big gap, and you shouldn't, because you know I've tried to measure all this carefully, but if this was much further way down here, the way you could fix that is to see how much that gap is, and you would take it off of this point up here and just kind of trim in a little bit. So fortunately that's not the case, and I don't think it would happen to you either. The other thing you can do is that we will eventually put a folded strip, a small strip of black cardstock across this ridge line up here, and we can also do that on any other roof joints that there are. So if this isn't level when you measure here, then you would just adjust your point up here, up or down a little bit, trying to make sure that you're engaging the walls all the time. And when you have the correct point here, go ahead and mark that on your Post-it and just leave your Post-it there ready to move on. So now that we know that this point is good and our roof is going to fit well, we can go in here and remove all of our score tape back. And then we'll just fold these pieces down out of the way like we've done before, so that nothing will engage prematurely. And do the same thing on these roof ridge pieces. I'm going to aim for that point up here. And I have some temporary tape that I put on my jeans a couple times and pulled it off just to make it even less tacky. Just using that lightly to hold this roof in place. I'm going to just I'm looking at it from the front and it looks good. I'm just going to put my level up here and make sure it looks good. Put it up just a tad there. And once it looks good, the reason we cut this access hole here is so we can reach in and secure all of the cardstock joining strips. So I'm just going to start and kind of tack down these top two at the roof line. And I'm going to gently pull this tape off. And if you're not sure that you can do, you should test any temporary tape on some scrap pieces of paper, because you certainly don't want to ruin your pattern paper up here. Can't really see anything in there. You have to go mostly by feel here. And try to reach in and get as good a burnish as you can. So there's our front dormer attached. The next thing we're going to do is to add the porch roof underneath here. And we'll dry fit it first. And it should fit right, it fits side to side, as you can see here. Fits side to side, and then we should be able to put it snugly up underneath the dormer. And it should be straight on each side. You may want to measure that and just see. You can also look at this front edge here and put a ruler on that, and that's another indication of whether it's straight across, because you would have the same amount showing. So you may want to put a couple of tick marks about where you're aiming for. What we're going to do here is, because we have to kind of slide it up inside of here, I don't think that using score tape is the best idea. I'm going to put some wet glue on it. I'll probably not put it near the bottom here, kind of stop about 2/3 of the way down from the peak, so that if it has to get smushed a little bit, I won't run any danger of it showing up underneath the roof here and getting on the pattern paper. You can also hold the bottom of the roof up out of the way, and then you'll be able to see a straight line coming across here. Use the words on the pattern paper to help guide you there. Then I'm going to run a bead of glue. Oops, got plenty. See how I don't have it in that bottom 1/2 inch, because when I go to slide this in, I don't want to get any on my pattern paper. I have this one tick mark lined up here. Just kind of stand up and look at both of my tick marks and feel that I have it centered here, side to side. And because we didn't fasten that bottom, we can go ahead and put some pressure on here. And I'm just going to reach in with my tiny glue bottle and if you can't do this, this is kind of a little hazardous here. I'm just trying to put some glue on the bottom of that dormer panel. So I'm going to hold that and the roof in place here till it sets up. Now once this glue is set up here, we can remove this tape backing. You might want to just double check and make sure it's not going to hang over. Mine looks good. And I'm going to do the base first, and I can peek in from the sides and just make sure it's kind of kissing there. And look at this other side. And then we can pull these tabs around underneath. I don't think it's necessary to finish off underneath here, I mean, you'd have to really get your head down and underneath there in order to see that. But if you're a person that likes to have everything neatly finished off, you certainly could cut a piece of either pattern paper or black cardstock, whatever, to go underneath there and finish that off. So I have the front sections sitting here, just letting this glue all sit up. I'm going to let it sit there for a while. And in the meantime, I'm just kind of playing with what I want to see to cover up this strip. And I think I'm going to use this strip of, it's from the 6x6 pad. It says Rare Oddities on it, and it's kind of orange. And for me, I measured, and I need a strip that's about a ½ inch to hit the porch line and to cover that space where we didn't have quite enough paper. And then I'm just going to center it here, I think, and then on the edges, I think I'm not going to try to like go up the side. I think I'm just going to have it go straight, and I'll cut that off at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to do that, and then you can see if you like that or if you think that some other plan would be better. So what I've done here is I took my strip of paper, and first I creased it at the width of the dormer, and then I knew that these angles on this side should be about 45 degrees. And so what I did to begin with is I cut it so that it was a little bit greater, and then tried it out, and then gradually trim back so that I've got my two corners just right. So now I'm going to remove my score tape backing, and I'm going to allow this to come all the way down so that it hits the roof, the porch roof. And then fold those little corners back. So I think that gives a nice little spot of color there, and also it finishes off that edge nicely. So now, like I said, I'm going to let this completely dry before we move on to doing anything else.